Okay, so today is May 24th. We're going to kind of go over government issues, regulations, licensing, and continuing education hours. We have a small class today, it looks like. Donna, Ingrid, welcome. We're going to record this sucker so we can get it out there for other people to view later. It's going to be a little bit shorter class today because it is a really boring subject. One that's important, but but yeah, just that, it's boring. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. I appreciate it. So we're going to get started on licensing. And every state has got their own licensing department. Typically, they are a real estate commission. They all go by different names, different acronyms: Alabama Real Estate Commission, the AREC, the IREC, Idaho Real Estate Commission, Washington, Oregon, and so on. Very similar with small little changes, but for the most part, they are demanding. They require that you be licensed. We all know that. The real important part is to make sure that we monitor our own licenses when they expire, and make sure that we do our continuing education to get those licenses back up to speed. Licensing is, they're fairly easy to work with in most states. They want to see you be able to do your business. They want to be able to see you do it in a ethical and legal way, and they want to make sure they're protecting the public. That's really the reason for these licensing departments. Let's see, I've got a slow connection. So yeah, we'll keep working on that as we go. But anyway, the states, wait, let's get the webcam on. The states are, they're pretty easy to work with if you haven't worked with them in the past. They are overwhelmed for the most part. Let's see, I keep trying to get my webcam up. Don't laugh, Alex. Okay, there we go. Okay, so they're pretty easy to work with if you haven't worked with them in the past. You basically just call them or email them. There's typically a person that handles real estate licensing specifically. In any licensing department in any state, in every state, they're handling licensing from taxi drivers to doctors, lawyers, all sorts of stuff. Hey, Alex has just joined us here in the conference room. So anyway, licensing is one of those things. It's a necessary evil in some ways to make sure that we're all compliant with them. They will hold those licenses over your head if you do make a mistake or if there's a complaint against you. So they want to make sure that they've got a little bit of power to revoke or suspend that license. So again, the key is to operate legally and ethically everywhere you do business. Make sure you disclose everything that you're doing. Make sure you disclose that you are a licensed real estate agent or broker. Make sure that the whole public knows that. Licensing, I do deal with a lot of different government entities, and licensing is usually the easiest to deal with. They genuinely want to make sure that we're doing business and that we're making money, but that we do it the way they want us to do it. So keep on top of your license. If your license expires on September 1st, make sure that you know that date. I know mine expires on September 17th every other year, so I know it's coming up this year, so I don't want to wait until September 16th to do my 30 hours of continuing education. I'm going to start planning that. I'm a procrastinator, so I'll probably start planning that August 1st. So, but there's a lot of ways to do that. And we'll, as we get into continuing education hours, we'll take a look at some of the companies that can help you with those hours. So the licensing departments, they typically have one or two people handling just real estate licensing, as I said. It's good to get to know those people. Tony here in the state of Washington is really easy to work with. In Idaho, Jessima is a point of contact for us. So I get to know these people so that if there is an issue, we can kind of work around that a little bit. So it's easier to always just be upfront with them. Like any government agency right now with the computer and automated systems, they will find you. You will, if there's an issue, it will not go away. So this is just the 21st century 21st century government. They make sure that they're tracking you. There's just very little that they let you get away with anymore. Nothing passes them. So I think it's always best just to communicate with them openly and honestly and just say, hey, if I made a mistake, I made a mistake. What can I do to remedy that? One thing I've learned from licensing departments is that they realize you're brand new at some point in this industry, that you're going to make mistakes, and they're okay with that. What they really, really get upset about is if you try to hide it, if you're trying to deceive the public, if you're trying to hide the fact that you're a real estate agent or broker, if you're trying to conceal some fact from the public, that's where they get really, really annoyed, and they will come after you. If you just made an honest mistake and you say, hey, I didn't know about this, they're pretty much like, okay, we're going to slap you on your wrist, and hopefully you learn from that. In every state that I've dealt with, and again, having hundreds and hundreds of agents in many, many states, we see the similar pattern with different licensing departments. And what they'll typically do, if you make a big mistake on something, they're not going to punish you as long as you rectify it, as long as you are honest with them and forthcoming with information. And then once you do that, they'll say, okay, you know, we're going to we're gonna basically let this one go. Don't do it. We're gonna mark it in your file, and don't do it again. But if you do it again, or you have another egregious mistake, they'll look at it a little bit more closely and go, okay, this is your second offense. We're going to go ahead and fine you a couple $100 and have you take a class or do this and that. If you do a third offense, then they start getting a little bit more serious. Like everything, 3 strikes, you're out, all these other 3-strike entities. When you make a third mistake, then they look at it as a pattern. That's when they start going, okay, we're going to actually investigate this to the fullest, and we may revoke or suspend your license. Typically, it's going to be a suspension. It could be anything from, you know, a couple days to a full year. And so, but typically on that third offense, it's going to be something maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, might be a month. But so you want to be really careful with them. And if we get to that third strike with the licensing departments, they're going to do something. So just expect that. And then once your license is suspended, it can become a real pain in the butt, because if you go to other states, they ask, has your license ever been suspended? You have to answer yes, and then provide all sorts of information as well. Plus, you're out of business for a month or however long that period is going to be. So you want to make sure you avoid that that third strike. The fourth strike, when you get there, then they're really talking about revoking your license. They don't want to put people out of business, but again, if you've done something egregious 4 times in a row, they're going to take some sort of action. And usually it's going to be a longer suspension or a revocation of license. Now, if they revoke your license or if they suspend it, you can appeal that decision and go through their process. But it's a pain. It's like, why even get there? And we've never seen anyone get there before, but I've talked to enough of these people to kind of know what they're looking for. They're looking for a pattern. So don't be a habitual rule breaker. I mean, some of it's laws, others are just rules as well, but if you break the rules, and especially if you're deceiving the public, if, for example, you just made a mistake and you didn't get earnest money to escrow in time, you waited 3 or 4 a week, they're going to be okay with that. They're just going to say, hey, don't do that again. You got to get that money into escrow. Don't hang on to it. Don't commingle it, things like that. But if they come back and they see 3 or 4 times you've been missing those escrow deposits, then they're going to be a little bit more severe. But that's not a real egregious offense. That's just kind of being a knucklehead. It's more when you're deceiving the public. Let's say, for example, you're flipping houses and you're not telling people after you've done some renovations that you're a licensed real estate broker. Or if you're trying to assign contracts, you're trying to buy houses for cash from little old ladies and then try to assign the contract to an investor, and these chunks of money are coming through the works. And one of the things that they're looking for, and I've actually been part of their investigations to help them with their investigations, is they're looking for people who are just trying to deceive, especially little old ladies or just the public in general. And a lot of times those people who are looking to buy houses for cash, we've all seen the signs, hey, we buy houses, any shape. You know, they're basically saying, we're going to pay you, we're going to lowball you and pay you very little cash for your house. You know, say it's $60,000. We're going to assign it to an investor for $80,000. They're going to put $20,000 into it, flip it, and sell it for $120,000. So they look at that as deceiving the little old lady, because she could have conceptually, she could have put a $20,000 of her own money into it and sell it for $120,000. And then when you're going to, and again, I've seen this firsthand, when you're going to try to buy that house from her, if you don't let her know that you're a licensed real estate agent, that's a big, big no-no. They might suspend or revoke your license for the first offense. So that's just an example of licensing. Keep that license current, know your license date, be honest, ethical, operate legally, and disclose to everybody who you are and what you're doing, and you should be fine. Licensing is not a difficult entity to work with. They're not like DFI or L&I or Revenue or any of those other departments. So, and you can always go to the licensing website online. They make it very easy to look up a license. But they also make it very, very easy for the public to complain. So right there, if you want to just go in and say, you know what, Joe Kelly just did this awful thing to me and blah, 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 you can just go in there and complain, and they have to investigate. And that's typically where I see it. Ingrid, you're in on this. You see it as well. If people want to complain about a real estate agent, they make it so easy to complain. And some of the complaints are really, really frivolous. Some are serious, they're legitimate, but others are so ridiculous. You know, it's just people that like to complain, and now they have an online venue. So the state will decipher kind of which one is more important, and they typically will call me and they'll say, hey, this agent is accused of doing this. Can you just send us the file? And then they might just let it go. Otherwise, they might investigate more fully. So that's the licensing department in every state. You don't have to get to know them intimately, but you do have to know of them and where their website is and your license expiration date. Okay, so let's get into state audits of transactions. So every state wants to audit your transactions. Pretty common, you know, just real common sense type stuff. They come into the office. Usually they come in unannounced. Sometimes they announce it. They're starting to announce it more and more because there's so much digital records out there. And so they want to say, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to audit your files, and we want you to have those digital records available. So it's pretty easy. They get in here, they'll pull files. Let's say paper files, for example. They'll see a box from I don't know, January of 2017, they'll say, hey, I'm going to pull 5 random files out of that box, and then they're going to look at them. They're going to audit them. So they just go through it. They look for the purchase and sale agreement. Every state, it's the same. So look for the full purchase and sale agreement, everything signed and dated. You know, they're very particular. They'll go through each page slowly, and then they're going to get to the earnest money receipt. The earnest money receipt to them is the most important piece of that file, because that's where we handle the public's funds. So make sure that when you do a transaction, let's say it gets signed around on a Monday, make sure by Tuesday you're going to escrow, you're dropping off a check, you're dropping off a copy of the full purchase and sale transaction, and you get a copy of the earnest money receipt. Typically, they'll give you a physical copy there, and then they'll email one to you later. But it's very important to have that earnest money receipt because it shows that we handled the public's funds appropriately. But the audits are simple. They'll go through those 5 files, and they'll find deficiencies. They almost always do, because they're really, really looking for them. But they don't really care so much about minor deficiencies. The earnest money is the most important. If they see a date is missed, or let's say, for example, you needed to get initials, you change in price, and you needed to get 4 initials, and you only got 3. they're not too bad about that. They'll note it and they'll say, okay, you know, here's a mistake, and they'll keep it in the file. Again, they're looking for that habitual pattern of mistakes. So the next time they audit you in 2 years, if they see the same mistakes going on, then they're going to ratchet up their challenge to you and possibly take some sort of action. Usually not, though, on something like that. If they see that earnest money receipts are missing from a file, and during that audit they see 3 or 4 files, the earnest money is missing, they're going to note that as a very egregious offense. And if they see it again in the next audit, they're going to take serious action. So that's what we're usually particular about that. They'll mention sometimes that, hey, you didn't get an initial here. Were you aware of that? And then you look at the file and you go, oh, no, I wasn't aware of that. We must have missed it. And they'll point out the fact that, you know, if a lawsuit happened and you didn't have that initial in there, there could be some real dire consequences to that. So in some ways they're protecting you, in other ways they're protecting the public. And in many ways they're protecting their own jobs. So, but the auditors are usually nice. They know well enough not to rock the boat when they're in the audit. You know, it's stressful enough, so they don't. They want to be friendly and they want to be fair. It's usually when they're out of the office, if there's something that they found that they didn't like, that they will let you know about, and you're like, wow, why didn't you tell me about that when we were sitting there at the desk? But for the most part, they point everything out, and you do sign the audit after they finish it. Typically takes 4 hours, something like that. So having offices in many, many states and having many different LLCs in many of the states, we see a lot of audits. In fact, I've got one right now, Vancouver, Washington. I've got to get back to Miss McDonald about an audit of our digital files there. So the digital files are pretty much the same, except they're just looking on the computer. They get access to, let's say, for example, paperless pipeline, and they look through the digital files, and they go, okay, I'm going to pick that one and that one and that one, and then they audit them. They do the same thing. They just look at them electronically. So pretty much the same thing. We're all trying to get to a paperless world. I think there's a little bit of paranoia out there that, hey, if we're in a paperless world, somehow our hard drive or, you know, the system, the servers get shut down. You know, there's always backups, especially with a company like Paperless Pipeline. There's going to be backups. They're going to be in the cloud, other places as well. But at the same time, you want to protect that information. So you're talking about very sensitive information. And if that's out there for the public to see or for some bad entity to hack into, it could be a problem as well. So there's that balance between coming into the digital world and making sure that it's secure and it's clean and it's safe and the records aren't going away, that they're stored for 3 years. Every state I know of is 3 years. So we might run into one as we expand more nationally where record keeping might be 4, 5, 6 years, but for now it's pretty much 3 years in every state. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water, look at the chat messages. Looks like nothing really there. Okay, any questions so far, everyone? Again, small group. I appreciate you guys being here. Kevin, Ingrid, Gabe, Donna. Thank you, but we'll breeze through this stuff fairly fast. Okay, so transactions, state audits, insurance requirements. So I kind of put insurance in with government entities just because there are government insurance organizations, and there's also the insurance that we need to satisfy government entities. A good example is Idaho. Idaho, they require, as every state does, but they just do it a little bit differently, that we carry E&O insurance. Now, they have a state policy where you pay, each individual agent pays $25 a month, and it's through a state policy, E&O policy. Well, what we do, we have an umbrella policy that covers all of our agents in all the states. And so we have to send that policy to the state of Idaho and say these agents in Idaho, all 60 of them, do not need to have the state-covered insurance because they have their errors and omissions insurance through the company. So, and they're fine with that as long as you give them proof. They want to make sure you're not just saying it and then something happens, something occurs, and there's no E&O insurance to cover it. So I disagree with that policy of Idaho, because what it's doing, it perpetuates these lawsuits. There are too many people that are like, hey, the E&O insurance of the state of Idaho will basically just investigate, they'll look at it, and they'll settle. So people make these frivolous claims, and they're just trying to get $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 out of it because they know that they can. It's a little bit easier. When you have a private policy, that's where they get their attack dogs and their attorneys on a case, and it's not so easy to win. But our E&O insurance is good. It covers everyone. It's up to $2 million, but there's a $2,500 deductible, which each of you are responsible for should there be a claim. Now, we've only had one claim in 10 years, so it's very unlikely there's going to be a claim, but it's also, with this many agents, it's likely there will be another claim at some point in the future. So we try to mitigate that and balance it the best we can, but eventually stuff happens. When that happens, like any other insurance company, you make a claim and say, okay, we've been served this lawsuit, what do you want to do? And they'll take it from there. Other times when we're served a lawsuit or we get a nasty gram from an attorney, we can send it to them, but an example was last year in Idaho. We sent it to them and said, we don't want to make a claim. We want to just fight this one, because we only had to spend a little bit of money to basically get them to go away. It was frivolous. We knew they weren't going to win. We didn't want our insurance premiums to go through the roof. And so we thought it was prudent to just fight it for a little bit, and we did, and we won, and they went away. So E&O insurance is definitely required by all the states. Washington is a goofy state. L&I, Labor and Industries, they have determined through the Supreme Court of Washington that you are all employees, not independent contractors, which you are, independent contractors. So go figure. This is a money grab. This is the most egregious money grab there is in government. We've paid them hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we've had one $200 claim in 10 years. So that's the one that rankles me the most, Labor and Industries, because truly we are not employees. You guys know it. I'm not paying you a salary. You're independent contractors. You go out there and work for your money. And that's why we do the reporting, the hour reporting in the state of Washington. So when we send that quarterly report out, please fill it out and get it back to us. It really helps in our costs and what we pay to the state of Washington. And they're a big, bad entity. They do not miss a beat. And once they see the money coming in, they salivate at that cash flow. And if you're a day late or a dollar short, they will let you know about it, and they will beat you over the head with a frozen salmon if you don't come up with the money. So that's Labor and Industries in Washington. Other states have, they have all sorts of different insurance requirements, but they're not quite as bad as Washington. So that's E&O insurance. There's L&I insurance, as we talked about yesterday in the conference call. There is your automobile insurance. You want to make sure that you stay on top of that, and that you have your automobile insurance when you're driving people around showing them houses. You want to be covered for that, because anything can happen. They get out of the car, they slip on the ice, and boom. And the L&I insurance is, they go back to, okay, you're showing a house, you slip on the stairs and you fall down and you break your collarbone. Well, that's an L&I claim. That they claim it is a claim. I'm not so sure because I've never seen it. Okay, what other insurance is out there? That's primarily it. The E&O insurance is the most important. And again, licensing works with the insurance departments. They know that people make mistakes. They know that there's new real estate agents out there, and even the veterans are going to make mistakes. And so if they make a really, really big mistake, the public is covered for the most part. That's Idaho's MO. But at the same time, it does create an environment where people just file these frivolous lawsuits. So there's a balance. I don't know what it is, but hopefully we get to it in the future. Doubtful, but hopeful. Okay, so the MLSs. MLS, Multiple Listing Service. we've got all these state laws. We have a lot of different organizations that regulate us and have their own guidelines, have their own rules, etc. The MLS is no different. So most of the MLSs are owned by the Realtor Association. Seattle and the Northwest MLS is not. I've said this before, Denver and Seattle are the only two major metro areas that I know of that are not Realtor associations. So Realtors have a little bit different rules. They're not too dissimilar from the MLS. They just charge more money, and that's usually the key. The MLSs, I'll just kind of go off on a brief tangent on that. So for example, Realtors have a dental plan. Sounds pretty good when they say, we've got a dental plan. Well, basically, they cover, I think, they cover 1% of one examination every 10 years. I mean, it's so ridiculous. I looked at it and I laughed. You know, it's almost zero coverage. So, but they want to claim that they provide these things. So I describe the Realtors as a union and a monopoly rolled into one. There's no other game in town, typically. And it's the same in Seattle with the Northwest MLS. You know, you can't go to the Realtor Association MLS in Seattle. You have to go through the Northwest MLS. So I think there's some antitrust issues there in each of these markets, but some of you out there that know me, you've heard me talk ad nauseum about that, so I won't get into it. But they are what they are. So the MLSs, you know, they control the feed of information. They control us as well, because we do have this information at our hands, and they want to make sure that they have the right bylaws and rules to guide us along. So they're fairly similar, operate in an ethical fashion, don't disparage other real estate agents, you know, treat the customer well. They do have complaint systems where the customer or client can make a complaint, so they can complain to the state, but they can also complain to the MLS. And we've seen that when people just get irate, they complain to everybody and anyone they can. And it's always interesting to watch that all kind of avalanche down. Typically it gets all resolved, but they're really mad and they want to make everyone suffer with them. So the complaint process is pretty simple. If there is a complaint, they'll determine at the MLS if it's valid, and if they feel it's valid, you'll have to come before them, and a panel of your peers will decide whether it is valid or not. Typically, MLSs will charge, if you are found guilty, guilty in the courts of the MLS, they will charge it $200, $300 that first offense. After that, they ratchet it up, $400, $500, $600. If it's an egregious offense, they'll charge $1,000 or $2,000. They just basically want to make it painful enough so that you don't do it again. MLSs, the Northwest MLS doesn't have the ethical training, so they just fine you. The Realtor associations like you to go to more ethics classes, I found. I think they like having you sit in 7 hours of ethics training. And if you're an unethical person, it doesn't matter if you sit in 1 million hours of ethical training, you're just not going to operate ethically. So I always think that's interesting that they make you keep repeating these courses, even ethics courses. But they will fine you, and they can suspend or they can't revoke your license, but they can suspend you from the MLS. And that gets a little bit goofy because, again, they have a monopoly. So if they suspend you from the MLS, and this has been kind of fought over at I don't think it's gone to the Supreme Court, but it probably will as far as their antitrust issues go. But the realtors, for example, they're very sensitive about suspending you, because then you can't go to the competition and go, well, they kicked me off of their MLS, now I'm going to go over to this competition's MLS. There's only one. So effectively, they put you out of business. They've done what the state is entitled to do, and I'm not so sure the MLSs are entitled to suspend or revoke your license. So it prevents you from doing business. So they operate fairly carefully in that regard. So anyway, hopefully none of us ever get to that point where they're suspending or revoking licenses. Again, if we're called in front of a panel of our peers at the MLS, so be it. You can have a lawyer represent you. We've seen that recently. where people just didn't have time or they were out of town. So having a lawyer go down there for you is not a bad idea. But again, if you're going to get a $250 fine, why spend $500 on a lawyer? Sometimes it's best just to take your lumps. And again, we all make mistakes, and they realize that. They just want to alleviate a pattern of mistakes. Okay. So MLS has lots of guidelines. Every MLS has those guidelines available. They're very easy to find on the MLS website. You can get in there. For those of you who are in Realtor associations, there's Realtor guidelines at the Realtor website as well. On the national level, they're all the same. The rules are all the same throughout all the little associations around the country. So, and again, most of it's pretty simple. It has to do with operating ethically and treating people fair and not disparaging other realtors and stuff like that. Let's see. Let's check for questions in the chat room. Nothing. Okay. Good. All right. Everyone's hanging in there. No one's been put to sleep yet. I got to keep drinking this strong tea just to stay awake. Oh. Government issues. Required documentation by law. So let's go over what they're looking for and what we need to have a complete and accurate file. Most of you people know what we need, but there's a few that are newer that might not know. So effectively, there's 4 components to a complete file when the government is auditing a file, and they're looking at the full purchase and sale agreement. And that means every page filled out completely, signed and initialed and dated completely. That full purchase and sale agreement with all the addenda that go with it. There's a couple other forms and stuff. In every state, we have a seller disclosure. So that seller disclosure is really important as well. We have to make sure that that thing is in there, that it's signed, that everybody has seen it. That is in every state's law, that the seller disclosure be given to all parties. So we want to make sure that's in there. The state of Washington has an Exhibit A law where they want the Exhibit A to be in there, just a legal description of the property. Other states don't really require that. The legal description of the property is usually on the contract itself. So that needs to be initialed. There's also the law of agency pamphlet. If any state has a certain agency pamphlet, that typically needs to be given to the client or customer. It doesn't matter who it is. They are entitled to that law of the agency pamphlet. But then the purchase and sale, sometimes what we see is people do their purchase and sale. They've got their financing addendum. They've got, whatever addendums, a septic addendum. They've got a title contingency. They've got optional clauses. They've got all this other stuff in there. But then they forget that there is some sort of form, let's say in Washington, Form 34 is a blank addendum where you can put in really anything, and you want to leave the antelope light fixtures or something like that. So a lot of times those pieces are missing. It's usually the stuff that comes after the initial purchase and sale is signed around. So you want to make sure that you keep those in there, that everything's clean. Ultimately, if they do go looking, they're going to find it, and then we'll all kind of get a slap on the wrist. So all the addenda that go with that purchase and sale agreement need to be in the file. And again, the seller disclosure, Exhibit A, any documentation that is associated with that transaction, put it in the file or upload it to Paperless Pipeline, and that way we've got a digital trail of it. The other things, the other components to the a complete file is that earnest money receipt we talked about earlier. The earnest money receipt is a really important one. I've seen some auditors just flip through pages, boom, 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 and they're literally going, where's the earnest money receipt? Where's the earnest money receipt? Where is it? Where is it? So that's what they're looking for first and primarily. And then after the earnest money receipt, when we get a check, when it comes in, or a wire, we're sent over the HUD. So the official HUD, the final HUD statement, settlement sheet, that comes with the check or wire or the payment. So they want to see that HUD statement. They want to see the check that comes in with this so they can match everything up, make sure the commission is what was on the HUD, and that nobody was deceived that way. So those are the 4 components that make up a complete transaction file. And we want to make sure they're as complete as possible. Again, it's really easy for us to pay you that day if we can just open up a file and go, hey, okay, look at this, thing's really complete. They sent everything in 2 weeks ago. You don't have to include an inspection report. You don't have to include an appraisal. You don't have to include some of those third-party documents. It's just those 4 items that I mentioned. Full purchase and sale agreement, all addenda, earnest money receipt, settlement sheet, the HUD-1 settlement sheet, and the check or wire that comes in. Okay, so that's pretty much required documentation. I want to get into the law a little bit before I go on to CE hours. So I'm going to let's move on to the interweb. And I'll go to Washington RCW, Revised Code of Washington. And again, everything's online. This, I used to have these big legal books years ago, and only lawyers had them. So it's pretty cool to see everything online if you ever need access to this information. Real estate. Taxation. Real estate. Come on. Probate and trust. Businesses and professions. There we go. Loading, loading, loading. Oh boy, look at that. Okay, so at least it's in alphabetical order. Real estate, regulations of business, court. I thought it would be easier to find. Plumbers, real estate brokers, managing brokers, 1885. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so we want to search for 1885. Come on, people. Here we go. 18.85. Legislative documents or websites. Oh man, their search engine is not easy. Okay, search terms, clear, RCW 18.85. Oh, good Lord. Section selection, let's try that. RCW 18, why is it not getting us there? That seems a pretty easy search. Okay, I'm going to go back to Google because I think Google is going to be easier than the state of Washington. RCW 18.85. There we go. Oh, that should not have been that hard to search. Hopefully you guys agree with me. Okay, let's get this guy back down. Okay, so in every state there's a revised code. This is revised code of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Florida, Alabama. All has this similar type of approach, and everything's online. But this is a good website to go to in the state that you're doing business in and look at everything in here. And they're pretty quick. When you look at the laws, they're not too detailed. They give you kind of a real simple format. So, for example, licenses renewal, continuing education, 1885-211. Right there, just one paragraph. All real estate brokers and managing brokers shall furnish proof as prescribed by rule of the director that they have successfully completed at least the required minimum number of 30 clock hours of instruction every 2 years in real estate courses approved by the director to renew their licenses, so on and so forth. Okay, so there, if you ever have a question, it's like, okay, what do I have to do with my continuing education hours? There it is, right there in the RCWs. Names is a good one. Restrictions. No license issued under the provisions of this chapter shall authorize any person other than the person named on the license to do any act by virtue thereof, nor to operate in any other manner than under the name appearing on the license. Okay, pretty clear. A lot of people, have questions about how they should operate and how their name should appear. Well, ta-da! The RCW tells us exactly what they are requiring. Let's take a look at some other ones. Change of location, real simple one there. Hey, if you're going to change your location, the firm shall give notice in writing to the director of any change of that licensee's business or records depository location. Okay, so you've got to give them, and most states have a 7 days or within 10 days you have to provide it. I don't see that here in Washington, but usually immediately. That's the best way to go. Disciplinary action, grounds, director's delegation, hearing, conduct of, order, appeal. So let's say you do have a disciplinary hearing with the state of Washington and you lose. Well, you want to find out, what do I have to do to appeal this? There you go, RCW 1885.390. And that will tell you what you need to do. Looks like right here, within 30 days from date of the director's decision. Okay, and so on and so forth. So a lot of stuff in here. You can kind of read this at your leisure. Fees assessed, enforcement provisions. The Attorney General is legal advisor. That gets a little intimidating when you get letters, on legal paper from the Attorney General saying, hey, we're going to beat you over the head with a salmon, and you're like, yikes, what did I do? Obviously, call me at that point. And typically, I hear about it as well right away. So when you hear about it, I'll hear about it. And then, of course, appeal, transcript, cost, whatever it says in there, it's going to definitely make sure you pay for it. I know that one already. Real estate education program account. Interesting there. We're working on that one right now. Sharing commissions. That's a good one right here. Boy, and my crew here tells me I need a new computer. I'm really starting to believe it. This is a slow one. Is unlawful for any licensed firm, broker, or managing broker to pay any part of the licensee's commission to other compensation to any person who performs real estate brokerage services who is not a licensed firm, real estate broker, or managing broker in any state of the United States or its possessions, any foreign jurisdiction. So pretty simple stuff. And again, Washington I like because the laws are easy to read and very simple to find. So you guys can look at these. Again, our section in Washington is 18.85. Any other state that you're in that's not Washington, just Google it. The laws or codes of that state for real estate, and you should be able to get there pretty quickly. And of course, there's stuff in here about the commission, because every state wants you to know about their commission and how they're appointed, how they're elected, how long they serve, all sorts of different things. Okay, so that is State of Washington Legislature. Go ahead and get out of there. And continuing education hours and where to look. Okay, so now that we've talked about a lot of this stuff, let's go to a website that is going to give us some information. So we will do Washington DOL. Okay, License Express. Just so you know, thanks for the reminder, Ingrid. License Express is how we transfer and we manage our licenses now. Washington was a lot slower than other states. Idaho and Oregon were already online doing that, but Washington was a paper. You mail in a paper license, and you fill out a paper application, and you wait for the mail and all that stuff. So they just converted that this year, 2017. So over here, professions. That's where we want to go, unless you've got to license your car, boat, motorcycle, all that other stuff. But Department of Licensing, professions. And then we can go down here to real estate. Voila. So it tells us really what we're doing here. How to get your license, how to renew your license, how to update your license exam. Tells it for brokers, managing brokers, for the company, designated brokers, how to do branch offices, and then fees and forms. So forms, for example, pretty much every form you need for the state of Washington is right here. So a couple of them are kind of old forms and all that good stuff, but oh, and the laws and rules, that's convenient as well. We're actually loading forms right now. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, let's see if I got hung up. Okay, so laws and rules right here. The law relating to licensing of real estate brokers and managing brokers. There we go, a PDF. There, look at that. 65 pages of just wondrous, boring stuff. But again, those laws that we looked up online, here they are printed out. So I think most states have this right there. Everyone has a Department of Licensing website. Every state does. And it's not just the RCWs in Washington, it's also the WAC, the Washington Administrative Code. So a lot of good resources there for you to kind of look up, and if you decide, hey, you know, I want to check out really what the state law is on this particular issue, it's probably there right at your fingertips. And then the WAC laws for licensing and examinations, for broker's office. Let's just take a look at one of these. And then here we go, display of licenses. This was an ever-changing one. We used to have to just pin them up on a wall, and now we can keep them in a book. And so it does change. There we go. So now it says, must be available at the address appearing on the individual license. All firm and branch office licenses must be displayed in an area visible to the public. So that's the one that changed. They let us know. In Washington, we can just have them all in one binder book up front. So if anyone wants to have access to that binder book, they can. But again, pretty simple. That's just 2 sentences. Advertising. This is one that a lot of people have questions on. So this gives us a good idea on how we can advertise and really what's involved there. Not use a name, title, or brand which suggests a legal entity separate and distinct from the firm, such as Inc., LLC, LLP, Corp, firm, or company. And again, they just want to see that you are operating under the license that you were given. So that's Kelly Wright Real Estate, and that if there is a complaint by someone in the public, they know how to find you and complain about you. Fun, huh? So, okay, advertising, real estate, firm identification, and so on and so forth. So all this stuff is in the Department of Licensing website. Trust account procedures, records and responsibilities, accuracy, suit or complaint notification, designated broker responsibilities. This one I've got printed up in a book in my office, but so that gives you an idea of what we as designated brokers, or me as a designated broker, what I'm responsible for. So on and so forth. Again, we don't want to go through all of them. I just want to give you guys an idea and let you know that the state has all of these laws online, typically through the Department of Licensing website. Okay. Rules, course approval required. Audio of the hearing. Oh, good. So you can listen to different hearings. So they've got a lot of stuff here as they change rules and all that stuff. Boom, it's right there. Okay, let's go back to forms and see if, there we go. The forms loaded up. So brokers, firms, educators, all that stuff. So let's say you're a broker and you want to activate. You've been on ICE for 2 years, less than 2 years. So you don't have to go through the entire process again, but you've got only a few days, let's say, to activate your license. Well, then you would just click on activation, fill out all your information there, and send it to the state. So you want to make sure incomplete applications, write their questions. I mean, the Washington State and Idaho and Oregon, they're all really helpful. So if you call these numbers or you email them, they're going to get back to you for the most part. Again, I like licensing departments. They're just much better than the ones that are really trying to get as much money out of you as they can. So they're pretty helpful. So yeah, all the forms are right there. You know, real estate firm controlling interest. If that changes, we have to notify them. If we're going to set up a branch, we have to let them know. And all these forms are pretty much right here. Okay, and the real estate commission, mission and members, all that stuff is there as well. So real estate, everything's right there in licensing. Pretty easy. Business practices, audits. We talked about audits. You know, there you keep your records for at least 3 years, must be available to the auditor. Just routine audits. And this is what they're looking for. To keep informed. So good. Everything is right there in the Department of Licensing. Oh, there's something I did want to check on for continuing education. So I'm going to go back to Washington DOL, licensing, professions, real estate, and how to renew your license. So we're talking about continuing education now. So again, this is Washington. It's the same in other states as well. Sometimes they require a little bit more continuing education hours, sometimes less. It just depends on the state. So start with the Department of Licensing in the state that you're operating. But here in Washington, license expires every 2 years. You can renew 120 days before your license expires. Counter services close January 1st. Thank you. You can still mail applications and forms or use the online services. Fantastic. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So start renewal. So you can renew online. It's pretty easy. You pay the fee and you say, hey, I did my hours. Now, you don't have to submit your continuing education hours unless they ask for them. So that's the one. So like right here, you do real estate broker, your license, your ID, your last name, your birth date, and then you continue on through the process. I don't want to do that. But it's pretty easy to do. But what they do, and I find probably 1 out of 5 are audited, where they send a letter a couple months later and they say, hey, we want to see all your continuing education certificates or your online course you completed. So if you're not aware of this, you can get your continuing education hours over the course of 2 years by going to title company talks and seminars and classes. And they'll give you a certificate, say 3 hours here, 3 hours there. You go to 10 of those, you've got your 30 hours. Or you can be like me and go, oh, man, my license expires a month from now. I better get on a course, an online course, and take that 30-hour CE course. And they'll let you know what the courses are here. There's a whole bunch of them, Pro Schools and realestateexpress.com and McKissock, and there's just a bunch. So every state has got them listed online. Let's see, and then they want their payment, Visa, MasterCard, criminal history request. You see right here in Washington, your 90 hours. So that's your required continuing education for your first continuing education. And then after that, it's just 30 hours. So most of us that have been in the business for a few years, this is the only one we have to worry about is these 30 hours. Okay, managing brokers, 30 hours. Renewal type, inactive renewals, no continuing education unless required. So if you're inactive for just a couple months, you can activate it and not have to worry about those CE hours until your license expires. So yeah, pretty helpful information right there, and you can renew online in almost every state. So voila. All right, let's go back here. Okay, so we kind of covered pretty much everything I want to cover. Again, I said this was going to be a pretty short webinar today. Government stuff is goofy, but we all have to live with it. So whether it's taxes, whether it's insurance, whether it is licensing, we have to take care of it. So do not ignore the government because they do not go away with their computer systems, and get everything in. And if you do make a mistake, you can always contact me. If there's something that's getting really heated that might turn into a complaint to the state, let me know about it. Ultimately, it'll get settled, it'll get handled, but sometimes it's not pretty. Most of the time, it is pretty easy. So you just have to let me know what's going on out there. Any other questions here? I'm checking out the chat room. Okay. Okay, so make sure you guys familiarize yourself with the Department of Licensing, with the Real Estate Commission, with the MLS rules and guidelines. Make sure that you understand what your responsibilities are. Don't make the mistake of thinking that we're going to take care of everything for you. We're not going to. I ask that each and every agent and broker be responsible for their own continuing education and their own licensing. Now, in the future, our plans are to have our own real estate school. So that's one of the things I'm working on right now. I've taken a couple courses to kind of get me through that initial step. Ultimately, I want to be able to supply continuing education hours to all of our agents for free. But it's going to take a while. I've got to go through the many, many, many hours of everything that they require and all that. So it'll be a while. But in the meantime, make sure you stay up on your licensing. Make sure you stay up on your laws, rules, regulations so that you don't find yourself not compliant. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. This is to the conclusion of Government Issues, Regulations, Licensing, and CE Hours, May 24th, 2017. Next week, we're going to be talking about our Fuse training. And I'm excited about that because we're really going to get into what we're doing with Fuse training and how it can benefit you and create more sales. So be on the lookout for more announcements than we've had in the past few weeks. We're gonna really announce this one and try to get as many people in here as possible because I think it's going to be a real benefit to everyone. Have a happy and safe Memorial Day, and I am out.